Dear doctors, scientists, fellow resident, medical student, and those people who came out of curiosity. Allow me to welcome you all to our workshop session. We're going to start by Dr. Samar Sagaf. For those who are in the medical field, Dr. Samar Sagaf is a well-known figure. She is the director of the healthcare education programs at SACM, Washington, D.C. Dr. Samar.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. The first يعني أول حاجة حقولها أباكم تحيوا البنات. البنات حضورهم فظيع. حيوا نفسكم يا بنات. The female is much more than the male. I'm not biased, but I think they are so well try to prepare themselves to be in US. To get into US educations is something that everybody is dreaming of. Now a lot of school for administrators, TAs, للمعيدين والمعيدات إن هم they would like to go for North American. كلهم يروحوا لأمريكا أو كندا. اللي if you can يعني معلش يمكن كلكم تعرفوا إنجليزي. Can I speak in English? Everybody? Okay. So to start with, I want to welcome all our speakers, and they are coming from US, coming to you, open doors, and welcome you in their schools. As I usually said, we made from the impossible possible, but the possible is not for everybody. The possible is for whom that they work hard and they get all the requirements. We never agree with any school that they will lower their requirements. You are my students, you are the future leaders. We want to make and create a leaders, not a create a followers. So you have to work hard in yourself, in your requirements, and you have to meet the requirements of all the school, either medical or non-medical, and you will get acceptance. There is nothing called impossible. If you work hard in your resume, statement of purpose, you read a lot. اللي عجبني, I can say it, last 2 days, I have amazing students that they came to us. They put the extra mile. عملوا شغلهم وسووا كل الأشياء المطلوبة منهم وعملوا كل الليست بتاعت الجامعات اللي هم they would يعني they know that this list they will get it into their choices specialty that they want. They make all the list, and one of the student was, I cannot forget her, she emailed all the 34 schools that she wants to apply in their specialties perio في dentistry. And she got 16 acceptance for visiting. So she start also to go and visit. She's not asking for application. She only go for visits. And I assure you, you will get not less than 9 or 10 acceptance. So do the extra mile. This is what I want from you. Please, try to do the extra mile that will lead you to the best elite program. You dream for it, and also we dream for it. Thank you so much. ممكن دكتور خالد, I introduce Dr. Khalid, the moderator for and coordinator for our session, the vice president of Taiba University. I worked with him as a colleague when he was the dean of medical college. And Taiba, we can congratulate Taiba, all of you. They have 4 residents in the match this year.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم. Dear attendees, dear my colleagues in the session here, I want to thank the organizing committee for arranging this workshop, which is talking about and discussing the undergraduate and postgraduate education systems in the United States. I hope it will be beneficial for all of you who are willing to go and continue their education in the United States. And we have distinguished speakers here from different areas of the United States, and they will show us, they will tell us about how would we improve our applications, how would we improve the way that we apply so we can get accepted in the programs in the United States. This is the main issue, this is the main thing, is that we understand here, you understand what is the system there, and then to get help in how to apply and to how to get through the system there. And I hope by the end of the session we can have our objectives met today. So I don't want to take much of your time. I want to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Suhail Rao, who is the System Vice President for Research, Auctioner Health System, and the Vice President for the Middle Eastern region, Auctioner International. He also serves as a professor and Deputy Head of Schools in Research Auctioner Clinical School and University of Queensland. Please welcome Dr. Suhail.
Assalamu alaikum. The topic that has been given to me this afternoon is to talk about undergraduate and postgraduate education, mostly from the viewpoint of what are the differences between the two, and also what is the philosophy that goes into both stages of education in the United States. Fortunately or unfortunately, I stand in front of you with experiences in at least 4 continents of either being a student or engaged in higher education. For my elementary and middle school, I went to Cardiff, Wales, so I have a lot of experience in England. And then for my doctorate, I also went back to University of Oxford, so I have both undergraduate or early education as well as postgraduate education experience in England. I also obviously have experience in Southeast Asia. I come from Pakistan. And I have been in the United States for the last 30 years, both as a student and also in senior administration in higher education. And very recently, for the last 3 years, we have been engaged with the University of Queensland in Australia. So probably my talk today is going to be tainted by my experience in at least 4 continents. But we're going to focus more on the United States, which actually is very common in all the 4 areas. So I'm going to talk about 4 different key tasks which were assigned to me by Dr. Khalid. We're going to talk about the role and importance of undergraduate and postgraduate educators. These are teachers. These are your individuals who are going to provide you with knowledge of collaboration, to collaborate more closely together. So how do the educators, actually from undergraduate and graduate education, collaborate? The second is how to bridge the gap between undergraduate studies and specialty training. And for a minute, I'm going to actually not wear my physician hat and talk about more generically as to what would you do if you have to go into a specialty training. I'll talk a little bit about a comparison between undergraduate and postgraduate studies, both similarities and differences, and then what are the cultural expectations. In the last part, I'm going to actually focus mostly on the United States because I believe that is one of the areas in one of the regions where majority of the students, at least in this particular group, might be interested in. So we have been told all along in our life as a student and then as a teacher that education is a continuum. Okay, you start to build your educational knowledge and skills from the elementary school, and it continues until you go into the university. What you learn in what we call K-12 in the United States is very relevant to what you actually practice in undergraduate and what you how it helps you in your graduate education. So this is a continuum, it's not, and that is one of the reasons why in the United States, the education falls under a single ministry, the Ministry of Education. And it is not actually subdivided into a Ministry of Education or Ministry of Higher Education. Everything falls as a continuum under a single ministry, under single policies and procedures of how a student is going to be mapped throughout their life as a learner. The more important difference that also exists in education in the United States is the continuous dialogue that takes place between various sectors of education, between the middle to high school, between the elementary to middle school, and between the undergraduate to graduate, which is extremely important. It is very important that the colleges know that the student who is coming to them has a certain breadth and depth of knowledge in a particular area. And it is very important for the graduate schools to know that the student graduating from the undergraduate program also have a certain depth and breadth of knowledge in certain areas that they are coming to. So there is a continuous dialogue between graduate and between undergraduate and high school and so forth, which is extremely important in higher education in the United States. So there is a need for this continuous feedback and dialogue between educators in various stages of education. For example, the universities traditionally reach out to high schools and advise them as to what are the areas of deficiencies or strengths that they are actually witnessing in the students that are coming into the undergraduate education in the university. This routinely happens. Routinely, the universities are going to actually set up a skills lab for not only the students in high school, but also the teachers in high school, to provide them with the skills that are required to prepare the students for a college life. So this is actually something that happens all the time in the United States. In fact, this is something that is actually funded by the federal government by a program called STAR, this is a program which actually creates the future teachers and students for academia and for research. And we actually at Auctioner have a NIH program which is funded by National Institute of Health and by the National Science Foundation called STAR. The more important thing is that each and every one of us, very early in life, exhibits certain aptitude. Some of us are great in maths, some of us are great in humanities, and some of us are great in music or history. And this is one of the uniqueness of the system in the United States, is that it does not provide mass education. It actually individualizes education based on your aptitude. Very often you have heard that parents are called very early in a student's life into the school, sometime even in elementary, where parents are called and told that your kid is actually very good in a particular area and we would like to give him additional classes in that particular area to exemplify this person's aptitude in that field. Now this is something that is very unique in the United States, and so is it in Australia and other continents. So the whole concept of mass education is actually going away, and more individualized education is actually the norm of the day today. Now remember, mass education is still required. People still have to take required courses in order to progress from one stage to another. But the concept of individualized and personalized education is gaining momentum in the United States. Now, one of the things which universities and colleges used to do was they never talked to the employers. They never talked to the consumers who are going to be the users of that particular individual, their knowledge and their skills. They felt, as academic institutions, that they know what exists out there, and therefore they are preparing the best product. Consider yourself as a product coming out of a factory. And if the consumers out there are not interested in what you have to offer, it is going to be very difficult for you to develop a successful professional life. This is changing. The change happened in 1998 when the Council for Graduate Studies in the United States created a program working with NSF, where they actually invited the top 100 companies for a conference, a 5-day conference in Vail, Colorado, where they tried to actually ask those companies as to what are your needs, both in terms of knowledge and in terms of skills that you're looking for in individuals. And that changed. They brought a sea change in the curricula for master's and PhD degrees. It has now happened also in undergraduate education, and it is now actually going back into high school education. So it is very important that you are trained and have the skills and the knowledge for a consumer, which could be a government, which could be a company, to actually utilize. And that is the reason why there is a constant dialogue now between the top 500 companies in the United States and between the universities, and therefore between universities and the high schools, as to what are the needs of the consumer. And that continuously impacts the direction in which that particular course or the curriculum takes. Now, how do we bridge the gap between undergraduate and specialty training? As I mentioned previously, there has to be a continuous dialogue. If I were to take for a minute, put on my hat from a medical profession, and for example, if we give an example of endocrinology as one of the specialty training for an internist who has gone through an internal medicine residency program, if the endocrinologist do not have a constant dialogue with the program in internal medicine, it's going to be a failure. If the neurosurgery does not have a continuous dialogue for people in prelim for surgery, it's going to be a failure. So I think there has to be a continuous dialogue between those who are providing specialty training and the undergraduate. We have to understand the behavioral education and applied skills required in graduates to succeed in specialty training. And I can tell you that one of the areas of focus in the United States is behavioral. Do you have the behavior that is required for you to succeed in specialty training? Do you have the attributes? And this has got nothing to do with your knowledge or your skills. It's your behavior. Okay, do you have the attributes to be a part of this particular faculty of specialty in the United States? And more focus is actually being placed on looking at your behavior as you move through undergraduate to specialty training. And as I mentioned previously, that there needs to be a continuous dialogue, but continuous dialogue alone is not sufficient. Individuals who are in specialty training must reach back into the undergraduate training and become part of the teaching academy of undergraduate training. So they are not actually viewing this at the end of an undergraduate training, but they are part and parcel of actually delivering undergraduate training, preparing the students for specialty training. And there needs to be proper guidance to graduate for specialty training based on their aptitude. It's extremely important. When a person goes through their academic life and wants to be let us say, an ENT surgeon, there has to be an aptitude that particular person must have in order to become an ENT surgeon. If one wants to become a physicist, there have to be certain aptitudes that the person has to have in order to go through a postgraduate training in physics. So I think it's very important that the mentors of that particular student very early in the student's evolution identify if the student has an aptitude and counsel them appropriately as to whether they should or should not go down this particular pathway. We have seen in our own programs people coming into very difficult residency programs, applying into very difficult residency programs, and they have no aptitude for that particular residency. So it is very important that you are careful in selecting what specialty training you will go in. What are the comparisons between undergraduate and postgraduate studies? Undergraduate, as most of you know, is a very broad focus. Knowledge is gained, that you gain is very generic, and that is true because you need to have a broad base of knowledge in order to then start your graduate education. Instruction in an undergraduate program is very much structured. You have those courses, and you have to take certain assessment tests. It's a very structured environment. You take 3 years or 4 years of that structured environment and you graduate. It initiates but does not really prepare you to be a lifelong learner. Okay, you start to teach yourself, but you do not have, there's no DNA change that has taken place in you where genetically you will then transform into a lifelong learner. And then it is obviously required for postgraduate studies. On the contrary, the postgraduate education is more focused in nature. Either you're going to do a certain area of physics, it becomes very, very, very narrowed. Or you're going to become a interventional cardiologist, or you're going to become a neurosurgeon. So it is very specified area that you are now starting to hone in both your aptitude, your knowledge, and your skills. Knowledge and skills that are gained are more specific, as we just mentioned. Instruction is more vague and less guided. Now, not necessarily in medicine. In medicine, the instructions are very much focused and guided, but in areas of humanities and others, it is very vague and less guided. You actually basically teach yourself in postgraduate education in humanities. Now, here is where you actually start to become a lifelong learner. Then nobody is actually going to ask you or force you to study. Nobody is actually going to ask you or force you to go into library and pull the latest article on a particular disease or a particular topic. Here is where you actually start to evolve into developing a passion for acquisition of new knowledge. And that becomes, that is where you start to have a genetic transformation of becoming a lifelong learner. And as I mentioned previously, the learning is more self-directed. You are the owner of your own destiny. Nobody is going to tell you whether you went to the library today or not, whether you attended a class or not. It is up to you to decide how much effort you're going to put, and that would be the outcome that you will get at the end of the day. Now, cultural expectations, and here I'm going to actually speak more about my own experiences because I came from a very different culture. I came from a culture which was very similar to yours into the United States about 30 years ago. And some of the things that we are now witnessing, and obviously in 3 decades things have changed, but some of the things that we are now witnessing in our own program from a lot of Saudi students and Saudi residents that are currently in our program. So I would like to humbly suggest that if you lack cultural competence, that's a suicide both personally and professionally. I could not put it any other way. A lot of students who come to our residency program for interviews, and those who do not get selected, I can tell you that vast majority of those who do not get selected is because of their lack of cultural competence. Their inability at times to shake hands of a female who is actually a faculty, one of the faculty who is in the program interviewing the student. Or not sit next to a female resident who is actually in a dinner table when they go out for dinner or lunch. Okay? Many of these incidences, and I can go on and on to give you specific incidences of cultural incompetence that have led to a disaster as far as the professional life of that individual was concerned. So this is a key example where a lady has actually extended her hand to acknowledge your presence and you have ignored it. And this has happened on many occasions, and when we approach these particular individuals, we are told that this is not actually allowed in our religion. Now, there is a religious barrier and there is a cultural incompetence here. So now what we have started to do is that every student who comes into our program, Saudi student who comes to our program, goes through 1 week of a acculturation course to help them understand and to adapt them to the American culture. We don't want you to become Americans. I'm not suggesting that. What I am suggesting is that we want you to be successful. In order for you to be successful, there are certain things you have to do least of which is not to accept the hand of a lady when she extends it. There are some visible cultural differences, and again, I'm speaking from my own personal experience. And I apologize if this personal experience does not translate into a mass experience of the valuable audience here. And there are some invisible cultural limitations. So the visible one are the communication style. The most important one is the communication style. How would you communicate with a particular individual? There are a lot of cultural elements that get into your communication styles. I have had students who have come and sat through a meeting with me with their legs crossed in front of each other, with their hands behind their back of their head, sitting as if I'm having a coffee with them in a cafe. Now, that may be absolutely okay for them, but we are having a professional conversation, and there is a certain manner of professional etiquettes that are required. Attitude towards conflict. You will have conflicts, okay? And this is an extremely difficult task when you are faced with conflicts, and how do you handle those conflicts is important. Approaching to completing a task. When I tell you, or when your mentor requests you to do a certain thing, it may be okay for you to just not complete it in your own culture, but it is absolutely unacceptable in the American culture. If you accept a task, you have to complete it. And there have been numerous occasions, including the one that happened last week, where two of the interns in our program did not complete a task that was given to them. And obviously, they got a call into our office. The decision-making style is extremely important. When you make decisions, do you take all facts into consideration? Is your decision based on bias, or is it unbiased? Is your decision does it have an element of racial disparity in it? So I think it's extremely important that you pay attention to these details. Attitude towards disclosure. There is something called confidential information. Okay, and in our world, that confidential information about patients is extremely confidential. And we have seen some of the students from different parts of the world who actually share confidential information with each other in public places about the patients without any hesitation. That's extremely difficult and no for a culture in the United States. I think there are what drives these visible differences is your belief and your values. And what is your perception? Many of you have come to our program, and not only to the program at Akshana, but I'm talking about, I have been engaged with 5 universities in the United States, from Boston, Harvard and Boston universities, to Drexel, to University of Pittsburgh, to the Tennessee Board of Regents, to University of South Florida, and now to Akshana. And this has been something that I have witnessed in all of these places. You basically say, I don't care about American culture. And that is fine, which is perfectly all right. But if you don't care about American culture, I can assure you that you will have difficulties as you go along. Now, nobody is suggesting that you party all night or you drink. That is not American culture, by the way. There are good sides of the American culture, great sides of the American culture, which will make you a better human being, which make you a more professional human being. And those are the attributes I'm talking about. So we talk about America, and we'd say that, American cultural intelligence is extremely high. We are very receptive to people coming from multicultural backgrounds. The reality is that we are not that good. We have a long way to go. And this is actually something that was published by World Health Organization and United Nations recently, that if the cultural intelligence of the average intelligence of the world is 1, then the country that has most cultural tolerance and cultural intelligence is actually Singapore, and followed by Germany, and then come all the rest of the countries. Now it is interesting because if you look at these numbers, these are also the numbers for all those countries which are successful. And the product of these countries are successful because they have actually inherited in their genetic makeup a cultural competence and intelligence. So I think it's very important that, and I was unable to find one for Saudi Arabia, frankly. If you do not have if you're unsuccessful in adapting to a culture, you will be isolated. You will have anxiety and worry. Your performance is going to deteriorate. You will be very high nervous anxiety, and you will find yourself helpless. And we do not want any of the students from the United States to be in that particular position. This is a perfect example of what I say, that when I talk about some of the leaders of the world and some of the countries which actually have very high intelligence still continue to have cultural incompetence. You can see what is happening here. They're allowing a female to pick up a paper. This is a real event that happened at one of the G8 meetings, where the President Obama dropped a piece of paper, and this lady, and he had little or no hesitation in allowing her to pick up the paper while he stands there and talks to other members, male presidents of the world. So I think we have to continue to improve. I'm the first to say that I come from a country where we are culturally tolerant, but we have to continue to improve our tolerance in this particular area. I leave you with this particular saying that success depends upon previous preparation, and without such preparation, there is sure to be failure. So before you come to the United States, prepare yourself. And if you prepare yourself, you will have a successful outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sahel, for this nice eye-opener speech. And I think the current message here is important, that if you're going to the States, you have to prepare yourself for the culture there. We're not saying this culture is better than the other, but if you're willing to continue there and go there, you have to read about it, prepare yourself so you can succeed in getting what you are going for. Our second speaker is Dr. George Jabour, and he's a Master Program of Finance Director and a Professor of Finance, Associate Dean of Executive Education, School of Business, George Washington University. Please welcome Dr. George.
Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure here to be with you today. In the last few days, I was surrounded by all medical doctors, and I am from the business school, so you can feel the pressure. And I was asked actually to talk about several topics, including the overview of the present status of undergraduate and postgraduate education in the US, development, the strong demand for postgraduate student admission requirements, process, and opportunities. So it will be a little bit technical. I hope you don't mind it. My references were from the US Department of Education, the National Center of Education Studies, the Association to Advance Collegiate Schools of Business, Institute of Education Sciences, and Wikipedia website. For the overview, we have seen in the recent dates actually an increasing in resources, especially through technology, increased opportunities globally, increased flexibility in teaching methods, including distance learning, increased number of electives. It is not anymore required courses, the core courses that people have to take, but more electives, and increased demand for specialized degrees, especially at the master's level. This is some history, and this is a designation between 2000 to 2001, versus the 2010-2011, you can see that most of the disciplines are increased. This is not a comprehensive list, by the way. The total undergraduate enrollments have increased in the US by about 38% over those years. You can see that the business has increased a lot. The sciences, health sciences increased a lot. Only education slightly went down. I can see that better, I think. For the master's program, you have the same norm, an increase in the business, in education, in health sciences, in engineering, and in public administration. What you don't see here, actually, the highest increase was in homeland security. It increased more than 160%. For doctor's degrees, there was an increase in health sciences, again, in legal professions and studies, in education, in engineering, biological, and biomedical sciences. This is kind of a review of what's happening in the next 10 years or so. For the 5 disciplines that are listed there, health, legal, education, engineering, you can see that 46% were in the health professions. Now we are talking about projections for the future. Those projections were based in 2010. It does not take into consideration the international students in the US. It does take the enrollments. It doesn't take into consideration the cost. It does take into consideration the age of the population. It does take into consideration the disposable income and the unemployment rates. You can see that projections are still good. They are not as before, but they continue to grow. In this slide, you can see the differences in the different age groups in 1996, 2010, and 2021 projected. You can see that there is a continuing growth, but the increase is at a decreasing rate. This is the difference per gender. You can see that the number of women enrolled in post-secondary degrees is higher than men, as well as for the projections, it's also the case. In terms of full-time, part-time, they are both increasing, but there will be more increase in the part-time for different reasons. Enrollment on postgraduates by undergraduate and postgraduate, you can see that undergraduate continues to grow. There is also an increase in postgraduate, but at a lower pace. For public institutions versus private institutions, in the first 14 years in this slide, between 96 and 2010, private schools increased by about 80%. Where the public schools increased by about 45%. But they both are projected to increase by 15%. So this was some technicalities actually about the numbers. But for development, we can see more and more online programs, local and global residencies, education, hybrid programs between face-to-face and online, increased number of applications in all universities in the US, increased interest from foreign countries, increased number of consultants, and this is very important development now between right and best. A lot of people, they look at the ranking of universities, but nowadays a lot of people, they are looking whether this university is a good fit for their child, for example, for this man or this woman. That's what I meant by right versus best. It is the right fit. Some people, they perform better in small schools, in small classes, etc. Some of them, they are looking for the best university based on ranking. Increased number of wait lists, funding shifted from family to loans, and this may become a serious problem in the future. Increased numbers of filled seats by December, especially for the undergraduates. Students used to wait until March or April to get their admission decision. Nowadays, most of them, they are getting their decisions in December. And this is due to the increased number of early decision. I hope you know the difference between early decision, early action, and regular admission. With early decision, it's a binding contract. That means if you are admitted to a school, you have to go to that school. It is not legal commitment, but it is a moral, ethical commitment. For the early action, also, you don't have to go to that school, but you get an answer early. By mid-December, you get an answer. For both early decision and early action, the deadline is kind of November, but you get your answers in December. There is an increase in use of subject tests. If you're familiar with SAT, for example, they have subject tests that they are taking. More and more they are requiring that. For postgraduate, there is a stronger demand for specialized degrees, especially in business schools. MBAs were flat in the last 5 years, but specialized degrees increased by about 40%. That's due probably for job requirements and or personal desire. The admission process for undergraduates is online, mostly online applications. A lot of schools, they do not accept any more paper applications. There is what we call common applications where you can apply to several schools. It's the same application, but you tell them which universities you would like to send them to. The degree, the program, and the institution specifics. Standardized tests like SAT, for example. Interviews. Work experience, if any. Statement of purpose is very important. A lot of schools, they read them very carefully to see whether there is a good fit between the applicant and the school, and some opportunities. More than 2675 four-year non-profit schools, based on that, the process starts at the junior year of high school, but most actively in the senior year. Graduates from high school peaked at 3.3 million in 2008, but expected to decline through 2015 before they rebound to 23 million in college in 2020. 25% of applicants, they apply for more than 7 schools. Admission steps that you have to pay attention to. First, the deadlines. You have to beat the deadlines. The choices, what kind of admission you would like to look at, early admission, etc. The essays, a lot of universities pay attention to the essays that you are writing. You visit the campus, interviews. Some universities, they require personal interviews or phone interviews. Most are centralized, not for a specific college or major. That means you don't specify what school you are going to. They have centralized admission process at the university level, not at the school level or faculty level. The common applications expedite the process. It becomes much faster. To evaluate an admission decision or an admission for application, they look at the grades of in the preparatory courses, the strength of the curriculum. They look at courses. Did you take some sciences, for example, beyond the required? Or you took, for example, the soft courses. Some people call soft like music, dance, something along those lines. Some of them, they look at it negatively. Some of them, they look at it positively, depending on which major you are applying to. Your test scores, your GPA, your essays again, your class rank. A lot of universities, especially the ranked one, they will look, where do you stand in your class? If you are not in the top 10% or 15 or 25%, they will not look at your application. Your counselor recommendation is very important, your teacher recommendation also, subject scores and extracurricular activities. A lot of universities, they would like not to be book smart people, they would like to have well-rounded students. Other factors, though they are controversial, diversity issues. Some universities, they would like to have a diverse group. They look at the ethnical group, for example, geographical location, etc. Some other universities, they are not interested in that. Legacy, if you have siblings, your parents going to the same school or something, so you may have a better chance to get into that school through what we call the legacy program. Family wealth, although it's illegal to make an admission decisions based on your wealth or something, but some people, they may look at it, although it's not legal. Personal connections always works, networking. Again, it's controversial. Maybe some people, they will not admit it, but it does exist. Admission tests, you have two tests that are for undergraduate.